I keep thinking about this number that doesn't sound real when you say it out loud. $9. That's it. Not 900, not 90, just 9. It's the kind of amount your brain immediately dismisses. You don't even register it as spending. It feels more like friction, something you slide past on your way through the day. I remember the first time I actually noticed it wasn't the $9 that bothered me. It was how often I didn't remember spending it. I couldn't picture the moment. Couldn't remember deciding. It was just there, every day. When I finally did the math, $9 a day turned into about $270 a month, over $3,000 a year. That's when it stopped feeling abstract, not scary, just irritating in a deep, quiet way. Like realizing you've been leaving a window open for years and wondering how much heat slipped out without you noticing. The habit itself isn't flashy. It doesn't look like bad decisions. It looks like convenience. The kind you reach for when your brain is tired and your patience is gone. Ordering instead of cooking. Paying extra so you don't have to think. I used to tell myself it was fine because I worked hard. That was always the justification. Worked hard, long day, earned it. And maybe that made sense at first. But somewhere along the line, sometimes quietly turned into most days. And that's the part I didn't want to look at first. Not how much it cost, but how normal it felt. The relief stopped feeling like a treat. It became maintenance. I wasn't buying joy. I was buying the absence of effort. And once I noticed that, it got uncomfortable in a way I didn't expect. Because going back suddenly felt harder than continuing, even though I wasn't getting much out of it anymore. Once I noticed it, I couldn't stop seeing how these habits hide inside routines. Same app, same time of day, same half-second decision. It doesn't feel like choosing. It feels like continuing. That's what bothered me. I wasn't acting impulsively. I wasn't spiraling. I was just repeating myself over and over. I remember pulling up my bank statement and recognizing almost every charge, but not remembering any specific moment attached to them. No memory, no story, just totals. That's when it felt a little heavier. Not dramatic, just this quiet realization that I'd been saying yes to the same thing on autopilot for years. It didn't feel like I was losing money. It felt like money was quietly slipping past me while I nodded along, distracted, telling myself I'd look at it later. Small upgrades are sneaky. Slightly better coffee, slightly faster shipping, slightly nicer version of something you already buy. They don't announce themselves as lifestyle changes. They feel harmless. I used to upgrade without thinking because the difference was $2 here, $5 there, nothing worth debating. But repetition does weird things to small numbers. $5 a day is over $100 a month. That's more than $1,200 a year. When I finally said that out loud, it landed heavier than I expected. Not because it ruined me, but because I couldn't point to anything meaningful it created. No improvement I could feel, just a higher baseline. And the strange part was how uncomfortable the cheaper option suddenly felt. Like I'd be taking something away from myself. That emotional resistance cost more than the money ever did. Subscriptions might be the quietest version of this habit. They don't ask much of you. They just stay. $10, $15, maybe $20. I remember telling myself I'd cancel the ones I didn't use. That was always later. Later turned into months. Months turned into years. One night I added them up. Streaming services, apps, random tools I barely remembered signing up for. It came out to around $87 a month. Over $1,000 a year. The number didn't shock me. It tired me out. Because that money wasn't buying anything active. It was buying my avoidance. I'd rather pay than think about it. And realizing that made the habit feel heavier than the price ever suggested. Gas station stops used to feel invisible to me. A drink, a snack. Sometimes both. $6 or $7. I told myself it didn't count. It was just part of the drive. but part of the drive happened 5 days a week. That's around $35, about $150 a month, close to $1,800 a year for things I couldn't even remember enjoying. The discomfort wasn't about the snacks. It was about how easily I dismissed them. It's small, became a way to avoid thinking. And once I saw that, I noticed how often I paid for convenience without actually feeling more comfortable afterward. The habit promised relief. It mostly delivered emptiness. Credit cards smooth this whole process out. That's what makes them dangerous. Swiping doesn't feel like spending. It feels like postponing reality. I used to think I was good with credit because I paid the bill on time, every month. But paying the bill doesn't undo the behavior. I once carried a balance made entirely of small, everyday charges. No big purchase, just life. The interest alone was about $60 a month, $720 a year, just to exist slightly more comfortably. Yet, that realization sat weird with me. I wasn't financing anything impressive. I was financing my own exhaustion. That one took a while to admit. I noticed this habit shows up strongest at night. When your brain is done, when everything feels heavier than it should, that's when the easiest option wins. I'd tell myself tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I'd have more energy, more discipline, but tomorrow kept arriving exactly like today. Same tired guy, same choices. That's when it stopped feeling like a willpower issue and started feeling like a pattern. The emotional discomfort came from how predictable I was. Not weak, predictable. And predictability has a monthly price tag. There's a social version of this habit too. Saying yes to things you don't really want to do just to avoid awkwardness. Drinks, dinners, events you feel obligated to attend, $40 here, $60 there. It felt like maintaining relationships, and maybe it was. But when I added it up, it was around $250 a month, $3,000 a year. The insight wasn't that going out is bad. It was realizing how often I used money to avoid discomfort instead of dealing with it directly. I wasn't buying connection. I was buying an easier conversation. I used to think budgeting was for people worse off than me. That was my rationalization. I wasn't broke, so I didn't need to look closely. That belief cost me more than I'd like to admit. When I finally looked, nothing exploded. The numbers weren't catastrophic. They were worse. They were boring. Leaks everywhere, no villain. Just habits that felt reasonable on their own. The emotional weight came from realizing how long I'd avoided looking, because I knew it wouldn't be dramatic enough to justify change. It was just going to be quietly disappointing. This habit messes with how progress feels. Raises disappear fast when money leaks quietly. I remember getting a small raise and feeling excited for maybe a month. Then everything felt the same. The extra money didn't create relief. It just padded the leaks. That realization stung more than I expected. Not because the raise was small, but because my habits were already positioned to absorb it. I didn't level up. My spending did. I noticed how often I use the word normal to defend spending. Everyone does this. This is just how things are now. Prices are higher. Life is expensive. All of that is true, but it also became a shield, a way to stop questioning anything. The discomfort came when I realized how much money I was losing without ever feeling like I chose to lose it. That kind of loss feels heavier than a mistake. At least mistakes feel intentional. The hardest part is that this habit doesn't feel like failure. It feels like survival. Getting through the day, making things easier. I used to believe future me would sort it out, that he'd be less tired, more disciplined. Turns out future me was just current me with a slightly higher monthly bill. That realization wasn't motivating, it was sobering. Like realizing the plan was never really a plan. I remember one month where nothing unusual happened. No emergencies, no big purchases, and I still spent almost everything I made. That scared me more than a bad month ever did, because it meant this was the system working as designed. The habit wasn't reacting to chaos. It was my default setting. That's a weird thing to sit with. There's a quiet grief that comes with noticing this. Not dramatic, just a low-level sadness over money that could have gone somewhere else. Savings, options, breathing room. Instead, it went to smoothing over days I barely remember. That's the part I didn't want to look at first. Not because it hurt, but because it felt pointless. I started seeing this habit as a form of negotiation with myself. I'd trade a little money to avoid a little discomfort. Over and over. The problem is those trades compound. Discomfort sticks around. Money leaves. And eventually you're left wondering why nothing feels easier, even though you've been paying for ease the whole time. This isn't about guilt anymore. I don't feel guilty. I feel aware. And awareness is uncomfortable in a quieter way. Once you see the pattern, it's hard to unsee. Every small charge carries a shadow of the total behind it. That weight doesn't go away just because you ignore it. I still fall into this habit. That matters. This isn't a story about fixing it. It's a story about noticing it. About catching the moment where you say, it's just a few dollars. And realizing how many times you've said that before. That moment sticks with you longer than any number. If there's one feeling that lingers, it's how tired this habit feels in hindsight. Not indulgent, not fun, just tired. Money spent to keep moving without ever stopping to ask why. That realization doesn't explode, it just settles in and stays. Sometimes I think about how different this would feel if the money disappeared all at once instead of quietly. If it hurt immediately. But it doesn't. It fades out slowly. And maybe that's why it's so hard to talk about, because nothing breaks, nothing goes wrong. You just stay where you are, wondering why it never feels like enough.